Hello, we discuss Channel 4's ambitious and disturbing drama film Sex Traffic. Playwright Chris Chibnall imagines what happens when a football star falls in love with his manager. Mark Kermode explains why revenge is sweet and bloody in Korean movies. And Julian Cope used to be a pop star, now he's more interested in ancient rock. World Shut Your Mouth by Julian Cope, who discusses his new career as a best-selling expert in ancient monuments later. Now, tonight's front row interviewee is the unlikely author of one of the most unlikely bestsellers of recent years, a scholarly guidebook on prehistoric monuments called The Modern Antiquarian. To many of a certain generation, Julian Cope is a name more associated with Top of the Pops than archaeology. But with more than 40,000 copies of his colourful and comprehensive digest of ancient British stone circles, burial mounds and monoliths sold so far, the former Teardrop Explode singer has forged a new career in the ancient past. Although he continues to record music and perform live, Julian Cope has never reclaimed the pop success he had in the mid-80s, with hit singles including World Shut Your Mouth and Trampoline. Where once Cope toured the gig venues of the world, he's spent the last 5 years researching the sequel to The Modern Antiquarian, a guide to prehistoric continental Europe called the Megalithic European. When he came to the Front Row studio earlier today, I asked Julian Cope to trace the start of his fascination with a distant past.
My mother-in-law, really. She's a Greek-American. She's a librarian. She's very informed by the prehistoric Greek landscape, Mycenaean, Tomb of Agamemnon, those kind of things. And I wanted to show her something of Britain, and she said, well, take me to Stonehenge. And I said, no, it's not that. That is not it. And eventually we went there, and I saw it through her eyes. And seeing it through her eyes, suddenly I thought, what the hell? You know, you're such a refusenik, don't refuse something that's staring at you in the face. The Modern Antiquarian worked because it travelled on two parallel paths. The one path was travelling, me discovering stuff myself. And the other was the part of me that said, don't you just hate people with theories who use what they've done to support their theory and ignore all the parts that don't support their theory. So just in case you disagree with my theory, here are directions to find these places. You can get there, and if I haven't got a direction, if it's too obscure, here's an ordnance survey number, and I don't want to hoodwink you. So I was trying to build a certain amount of trust in people.
And you've employed the same approach for the Megalithic European. But because of the success of the Modern Antiquarian, do you regard yourself, or are you regarded by your archaeological peers now as something of an expert, do you think?
I'm fearful of the term expert because there's still that part of me which is a refusenik.
So you're an enthusiast?
Yeah, I think so. I think I am like an antiquary of the past, in as much as I use the money that I earn from rock and roll to support this. I don't have colleagues. I have a lot of friends who are archaeologists. I've done 2 sets of lectures at the British Museum. The people who appreciate me are people who are things like editors of archaeology, the editor of antiquity. They don't have a problem with me because they know I've been there. And I've described them in the past as being, they're almost like spies who are waiting to debrief. And then nobody else has been there. So they speak to me and they go, you've been to those trawlers in Menorca, aren't they incredible? What do you think? And I go, they're fantastic. And then we start talking, and it doesn't matter.
But let me just ask you about those lectures at the British Museum. I wasn't there, but I read a report that you turned up wearing 5-inch stack heels and face paint, hairspray, and a cape, possibly. Did that not scare the hell out of the people?
It did. There were a couple of fluttering biddies at the front who were who didn't leave and did listen, but they were 2.5 hour lectures.
So you haven't been measured for the tweed suit yet? I mean, you refuse to go down that line.
I can't go for the tweed suit. I think that part of my thing is I'm not an author, I'm a rock and roller who writes books. What's central to my books is that they're useful. And what is central to my art is that it's useful. In some ways, I always felt, coming out of punk rock, that rock and roll is a useful art form. That if art is not useful, then it's just a bourgeois nothing. Unless it has incredible use. And I figure that that's what my job is. So there's a certain amount of duty in, I want to be understood. And I really think that when people are this far away from the grindstone all the time, that part of my job is to say, you know, when you went with your great aunt Agatha to that place, did you know that just down the road was this amazing place that has been there since, for 5,500 years? See it with fresh eyes. and it can open up something.
I mean, without doubt, this is a really impressive piece of doorstepping scholarly work, but also I like the kind of the domestic aspect as well, because you quite clearly, on very many of these visits across continental Europe to wherever, I mean, we're here on Portugal at the moment, I opened another page, we're in Germany, there's Crete, but there are pictures of you standing on the stones, looking at the camera, but you're often surrounded by your family, your wife and your children there as well. So did these field research trips double up as family holidays then?
No. Actually, very much the opposite. I couldn't foist that thing on them because the modern antiquarian had exhausted them. When it was Greece, I've got a lot of Greek family, so they were in there in Greece. A lot of places I was on my own. Right. A lot of places I'm with somebody who can help me. The strange part about this is Britain knows more about its prehistory than any country in the world except France. Britain and France, they're peerless. They're the only people who know everything about their prehistory and want to know more. You get to other places, they know absolutely nothing. So you go to Denmark, and a Danish archaeologist will know an extraordinary amount about Denmark, but he won't realize that the monuments, which are just over outside Jutland in Schleswig-Holstein, are virtually the same. Not only that, many of them won't even be interested that they are. And as far as I'm concerned, the end papers are all based on people looking and seeing that this is a physical landscape, which is based on people and how we travelled and the way in which we travelled and why we travelled and what our needs were and how we met them.
It has been a solitary pursuit for you largely, hasn't it? Over 5 years.
Very.
And we talk about sales of 40,000.
Yeah.
You were probably doing that in a day in the 80s when, you know, you were in
With
your
the
rock and roll
Teardrops,
heyday.
yeah.
Teardrop Explodes and then World Shut Your Mouth with that single. Do you miss that kind of adulation, that rock and roll sense of adulation?
No, because what happened was, it's a bit like everything with rock and roll. I went to Australia and everybody said, "Are you pleased to be here?" And I was like, "No, I'd be pleased to be here if somebody had told me that I was going, you know, I'd had more than 5 days to prepare for it." Most people get to go to, I don't know, some place of their dreams. They got loads of time to anticipate it. With the success in the 80s, a lot of it was unexpected, so I didn't have time to anticipate it. So in some ways, I was virtually there and gone before it had happened.
Saw the inside of the hotel.
Yeah.
And then the gig, and that was it.
And so really with this is something that I've had time to anticipate, and it feels good.
Are you proud of those? I mean, which of those rock and roll moments are you most proud of?
I'm proud of all my rock and roll moments. My kids come in and they say, "Dad, you're on Top of the Pops too. You know, it's that Shut Your Mouth song again. That Shut Your Mouth song's a good song. You know, Reward is a good song." They do have a sort of an iconic stomping rebellion about them. I'm glad that I'm remembered for the right songs.
Has it taken you some time to come to terms with that commercial success? Because I know for many years you pursued a very anti-commercial musical path, and you talked about that album, the one World Shut Your Mouth, St. Julian, which was, you know, mega selling album, and you were pretty disparaging about it, actually.
Yeah, I was. I think that I went through the total sort of revulsion at aiming for something like that, and in some ways it just takes a long while to look back because you don't want to reflect. I did have that Bob Dylan "don't look back" thing, and to a certain extent now, I realised that it was just I was young, you know. William Burroughs was 43 when he wrote his first book. You know, I'm only 46 now. Rock and roll has always been polarised. It's either, to be a rock and roller, you are either the greatest, most slothful underachiever in the world, or you're the most fervent overachiever in the world. I want to bring my overachievement and my garrulous, sociopathic behaviour to the table and say, okay, I've achieved this. What do you think? It's going to be, you know, the new book is 813 colour photos. And I did 4 tours of Japan and never took a snap.
Julian Cope, whose new book, The Megalithic European, is out in hardback on Monday.
Front Row was presented by John Wilson and produced by Phil Tinline.